Did he post lecture too?
Mm-hmm.
Did he post week 2 yet?
Yeah.
Bet.
send the police thing?
Hmm?
Can you send the police thing?
Yeah, man. You guys have it from here it is. Yeah, so it's normally gonna be issued as a student. You pay $32, right? For your police vulnerable check. You must be a full-time and provide a valid student card. Then I put vulnerable check. I got logged out of this whole because I lagged out. I basically put in all like information, your address, info, photo ID, and your other ID, and then you just choose the direct location where you want it.
Oh wait,
And then you
scroll
just
up
submit
though.
it.
Oh, so York region.
York Regional Police. Are you not in York Regional? You are in York Regional Police, right? Because you're in Scarborough, right?
That's not York.
Like, no?
Isn't there a separate Toronto one? This is the one I saw. This.
Yeah, really thinking.
Like this one.
Oh, you're in the Toronto Police Region. That's like I'm in the York Regional Police. That makes more
Like, I
sense.
think, yeah, should be in the York region. I think York
I don't
region.
need this works.
Asking for fucking agency code.
Basically, if I started from if he said start at chapter 1, page 2 to 16. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16.
How'd you get the course shell on your phone? How'd you get the course shell on your phone?
A pulse.
Oh, I gotta download that.
You got down that road. You get everything on your phone, just way more easier. This doesn't look right. Honestly, I'm being honest, I'm not doing ITLS. I might do it as like a reading for like the fun of it, but I think everything I'm looking at doing is Nancy.
Nancy.
And I can't be bothered trying to figure this out with ITC. If
I think ITLs is just like a little bit more additional stuff.
Yeah, Nancy.
vodka in mine. You can't tell the difference between vodka and water until about 4 o'clock or so. That's right. That's right. We think of vodka. Tell me that. And then we drive. And then fight. I see those videos online. That's what they do. They sit around. I don't know. Were you born in Russia and then came here? Yeah. How old were you when you left?
Born and grew up in Russia.
How old were you in Russia when you left?
22.
Oh God, so you're long enough. You know how depressing it is. The sun never shines because it's communism. Putin says no sun. That's it. No sun.
It's the red sun.
That one. That's red. Everything's red. So everybody have a good weekend?
Sure.
Feels like I just taught this morning. Oh, yeah. Laws affecting paramedic practice. So now we're gonna start bridging out into the content areas of all the pieces of legislation that apply to you guys, and some of the things that we're gonna talk about in more detail going forward in the next few weeks. We're also gonna talk about a little bit more briefly, summarize the legal system in Canada. There's a lot of similarities between the US and Canada, but I would never use the American system to compare to us or to try and understand, because their legal system functions a lot differently than ours, and we can kind of dig into that a little bit. We're going to talk about PHIPA today. That'll come after the end of this section of the lecture. But the areas that we're going to get into here is accountability, neglect, liability, and special consent issues. I'm going to mention about the mandatory reporting areas. We already kind of mentioned one last week, and that was the Child in Need of Protection Act. But the legal framework that you're working with will depend on the context of the situation that you're in. So if I look at legal and try and tie it into paramedic practice, I kind of look at it like we're at the station, we've just booked on, we've just been hired, so the Ambulance Act would apply to us, and then maybe the Highway Traffic Act, because we have to check our ambulance and we have to do a circle check, and then some SOPs would apply to us because we have to, do a circle check or maintain the station in a certain way and check our equipment. And then if a 911 call comes in, driving to the call, the Highway Traffic Act starts to apply. And then when we're on scene, the Occupational Health and Safety Act and the BLS for patient assessment, and on and on and on, and it goes on and on like that. And so at different junctures along that linear process of a call, from the time you leave the station or wherever you happen to get the call to the time you drop the patient off, and so on, there's different components depending on the situation that will start to apply. So we'll set that different components of the framework. Sometimes it's just one, sometimes it's a multitude of them. But that framework sets up to support a lot of what we do out there. So I mentioned ethics last week. So ethical responsibilities. You're required to and expected to, as part of being a paramedic, to not only respond to and treat a patient and put the splint on the right way, you're expected to, under ethics, to respond to their physical and emotional needs as well. So the pieces of, is the patient comfortable? If they look like they're in pain, maybe there's something we can do to make them more comfortable, to actually care, okay? Some of that stuff is some, at times, the more challenging things to stick with, because as we're busier on a shift and as we become fatigued and our brain doesn't function at 100% capacity anymore because we're kind of maybe burning out a little bit, you may start to care a little less. But you have to be really careful because that's one of the more important things that we do. One of the stories I can share, there was a lady that lived in a senior's residence at O'Connor, Victoria Park area of, I guess that's still Scarborough technically because it's where it is on Victoria Park. And she was a frequent caller. The guys in the station was like, she fucking calls all the time, sometimes fucking twice in the night, fuck. 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, we go there. There's nothing wrong with her. On this particular night, 3 o'clock in the morning, sure enough, we go there. It's my first time seeing her. She's lonely. There's nothing wrong with her. She's lonely. Is there anything a paramedic can do for somebody that's lonely?
Talk to them.
Well, we're talking to them, assessing them. Right? That's talking to them. What else can I do?
Maybe connecting them with some specialist that will
And that maybe too, she could refuse that, but. So, there's nothing wrong with it. My partner's like, fuck, this is a waste of time. I'm gonna go downstairs and check the truck, clean it up. So I went in the lady's kitchen, found some tea bags, hot, boiled some water, pulled out some cookies. My partner's like, you're crazy, you're not gonna, I'm like, yeah, I am. And I made a cup of tea, and we sat on scene for an hour and a half, and I had tea with this lady, because that's what she needed, she needed another human being. So that loneliness, that disconnect from society, we never saw that before, and you may not be able to relate to it until COVID. Lock down, stay in your house, protect your neighbors, stay in your house. So that's what we did. Meanwhile, we had isolated from each other, and I think some people still can't connect with each other right there because of it. But that ethical piece of actually taking care of people, that human aspect that we forget about. Okay, so that's one of the pieces there. The other one is with regards to your education and training. You make sure that you get the best participation in the best education that you can, which is why you're here. And maintain that mastery of your skill by practicing, by reflecting on what you've done on that last call to see if there's anything that you can do better. I was on the job for a number of years before somebody mentioned this whole thing of reflective practice. I heard nurses do it, right? Because their college, their regulatory body requires them to do it. And we laughed at them, reflecting. What, you go home and you look in the mirror? Right? But the value in reflective practice, I can't tell you how important that is to making yourself a better paramedic student. Every day when you come to class, afterwards you should look and say, did I do the best I could in there? If I thought I didn't understand something, did I put up my hand and ask the question? How am I adversely affecting my learning? What went well in there? And it becomes more important in lab when you're starting to do scenarios and cases where you're being taught a certain skill. Did I pay attention? Did I do that skill properly? Is there a better way of doing it? Or did I accept that criticism or that advice from the instructor? And on and on. And then to carry that with you when you're out there. There was nothing that was more impactful on my practice out there as a paramedic than reflective practice. So I implore you to consider it. I can't make you do it, but it's important. Honesty. You don't steal. You don't lie to the patient. You report things properly on your documentation, and you tell them as they are. When you make a mistake, say you give them the wrong medication, you call the self-reporting line and you admit, I gave the wrong medication, this is what happened. And that self-reporting system is not meant to be a punitive one, because we're brought up in a punitive society. You crossed on the red light. You're a sinner. You cheated on your spouse. That's what we're brought up. But that reporting system is not meant to be a punitive one. Yeah, you might get in a little bit of trouble. There might be a little bit of retraining and then some questions, and it might be that uncomfortable conversation. But the ultimate piece of that self-reporting line is so that the base hospital can determine what happened so that they can prevent it happening again. It's about patient safety. If you don't report it, if you cover it up, it's not contributing to the patient safety. Now someone else can do it. Someone else could make the same mistake. And maybe it'll be somebody that you know or a family member that ends up being harmed as a result. So reporting honestly. Okay? Working with others. Just because we don't like firefighters does not mean that we have to tell them that we don't like them. There's lots of reason to not like the fire department, but they've probably got just as much to not like us. Anybody ever seen the movie Dawn of the Dead? What did the zombies do when they overtook the ambulance near the cemetery? They got on the radio. What did they call for? They said, send more paramedics. They didn't ask for the firefighters. You know why? Because what do zombies eat? Brains. Who has brains? Just telling you. Sorry. I'm sorry. It all comes back to that. I can't help it. The truth. So, the bottom line there, protect yourself. And I'm not talking about putting on PPE. That's Augusto's stick. Right? You got to play with the finger paint last week. But failing to perform the job as required or appropriately can lead to civil and criminal liability on your part. So, but as long as you do appropriate assessments and care, along with accurate documentation that aligns with the standards properly, you're almost not, it's almost impossible to get in trouble. I can't say that there's no possible way you'll get in trouble, but it's almost impossible. So, the legal system in Canada has this legislative law. Legislative law comes from the government. It's enacted at the different levels, federal, provincial, and municipal branches. A good example of federal law is the Criminal Code of Canada. It's a federal law. So if you beat somebody up, it tells them in there what they're going to do to you and how long they're going to put you in jail. Same as murder. Okay? Same as, assault with bodily harm. They call it, they say it differently in the States, but anyways. It's all defined in there. It's all created by the federal level of government. The criminal code goes across Canada, but the provinces take over and do their local area of enforcement. Okay? The second one is called the administrative law, and these are the acts. These ones are created by the province in which they're enforced. So Ontario has its set of acts. A bunch of them, I've said, now, I said them, and then last week. So Occupational Health and Safety Act, Ambulance Act, Human Rights, all that, all those things, they're administrative. Highway Traffic Act. So it sets out administrative things about how certain branches will work and what's allowed and what's not allowed. And in the case of the Ambulance Act, it defines in there, it's divided into two sections. So when you're looking at the Ambulance Act, the very first section is for the service operators. The second section, about halfway through, is for the paramedics. You'll see in there qualifications to become a paramedic, and it will list them in there. Pretty bright, speak English, legally entitled to live in Canada, graduate of a college course or its equivalent, all that stuff is written in there. But it also delineates the different scopes of practice for different paramedics. In the Ambulance Act, it will say what a PCP can do, what an ACP can do, what a CCP can do, what a first responder can do. And so those pieces are important for you to know, especially for when you're going through the hiring process. The other two components are not actually legislative pieces, but they're called common law and civil law. Common law is judge-made law from precedent. It's been precedent-setting cases, and they've created these laws. Also derived from society's acceptance of what is normal, what is a custom, what's customary. So, good example of common law is family law. So if you live with a partner together in a relationship for 1 year in the same residence, you're considered to be living in tenants in common or common law. And the same stuff applies to you in that situation as if you were married. So a lot of people I know, they think, I'm not fucking getting married. I'm not gonna be responsible if we get a divorce. And so they go ahead and enter into this, and it's like, oh, no, mon frere. Guess what, pal? You just lived with that person for a year. You can pay support. You can pay alimony. You may have kids and have to take care of them. That you might have to split your assets. So that is something that has come up. Then there is civil law. So civil law is where harm, damage, or bodily injury has occurred to an individual and is coded into law. It also includes things like contracts and wills, but personal injury is a big one. So someone is climbing down the stairs at the youth center, slips on some water that they failed to clean up, and they fall. There could be a civil lawsuit against the owners of the youth center if that person is hurt when they fell. So civil law has these things. We're not moving there yet. Criminal law has set fines in the code of what will happen to you, as I said, and it's the federal, provincial, or local municipal government that goes after you for criminal code violations. So drunken driving is in there, murder, etc. And as I said, the individual, private complaints, enforced by bringing a civil lawsuit, and the plaintiff requests court to award damages. These two things are measured differently in the legal system. So if you were charged with murder, they would have to prove that you murdered so-and-so beyond a reasonable doubt. There's no reasonable doubt that you did it. Even if you keep saying I'm innocent, the evidence says otherwise. Okay, so beyond a reasonable doubt here. In civil law, if you've ever seen the figurine that's holding up the scales of justice, this is an American thing, but it's a good example. It's a statue, and the statue has a blindfold on because justice is blind. Okay, doesn't judge you, it's not subjective. And then the scales of justice in civil law is decided by a preponderance of the evidence or tipping the scales of justice either towards the plaintiff or the defendant by preponderance of the evidence. Okay? So you only have to tip the scales of justice a little bit to win in a civil case, whereas criminal law is beyond reasonable doubt. In civil law, there's these things called torts. On the second floor at Tim Hortons, you can get a tort. You can get a raspberry tort. You can get an apple tort. They come with icing on them, and they're very nice. They go nicely with the tea at about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Is that like subliminal advertising there, maybe? So these torts can be by an individual for wrongdoing. I got harmed by something, it's your fault. Or a tort can be a massive lawsuit by a large group of people. A good example is the tobacco industry. When, many years ago, they filed a tort against R.J. Reynolds. R.J. Reynolds was a large tobacco cigarette manufacturer in North Carolina. In particular, it was Winston-Salem. One of the brands of their cigarettes, Winston's in Salem. Weird, huh? Well, the tort, R.J. Reynolds lost because people had said that you caused me to become addicted and I got cancer and blah, blah, blah. It'd be like telling people, sue McDonald's because you eat there every day, 3 times a day, and they made you fat. It's like you made the choice to fucking go to McDonald's. That's what made you fat, not McDonald's. But anyways, I'm not a lawyer. So R.J. Reynolds lost and went out of business because the punitive damages were too big. So they don't exist anymore. But basically you're looking at a person committed something wrong against another and caused damage either to the person or the property. So a tort could be against the neighbor. Their tree, the branch broke off. You knew that that branch was going to break. You told them that it was rotten. They told you to F off and continue to drink beer. And then the tree broke and it damaged part of your house. So you might file a civil lawsuit against them. So that's a highlight of the little processes that we have in Canada in the legal system. It's not meant to be some comprehensive analysis and discussion of the legal system in Canada and how the proceedings work. That's another course. Yeah.
So are courts similar to like civil laws?
That is a civil law. So how are you measured as a paramedic? So how do they know whether you're doing the right thing or not? Well, the first piece is the scope of practice that's listed in the Ambulance Act. It tells them in there what you're certified to do and what your responsibilities are. If you start to do things that are not within your scope of practice, that'll be a problem. If you do something that you're not certified to do, that can cause you to lose your job. Could actually cause you to be sued if you harm somebody by doing something that you're not certified to do. There was a PhD 3 class, several years ago, and one of the students was very, very insistent because they were learning about trauma, motor vehicle accidents, and labor and delivery. And the student was very insistent and was actually starting to argue with me until the other students were like, you better shut up, Chris. But Point was, pregnant, trapped, they're gonna die, can you cut the patient open and take the baby out to save it? And my answer was, no, no, no. Well, why not? You're gonna save the baby. And I'm like, it doesn't matter. It's no, it's still no. Anyways, scope of practice. You're not cutting open to save it. It doesn't work that way. Now, if you could, would you use a chainsaw? That's the question. Medical direction. What is medical direction? Well, medical direction is where you get the authorization to carry out the advanced life support standards. So that was the other PDF that I had mentioned along with the BLS. You should look for ALS standards like 5 point, I forget what they're at now. It's the basic one that came out in July, maybe 5.2 or something like that. That you're going to have to know very well in semester 2, to a small part in this semester, but later on. So that's why I said it's not, you know, that. Medical direction is where we get our authorization to carry out that stuff in there. Because there's controlled medical acts in there. There's medical acts that only people that are authorized by a doctor or are a doctor can do. Okay, and there's this Regulated Health Professions Act that we'll talk about later in the semester that will help you kind of understand where that all kind of comes from and why we need that. Paramedic, working outside and beside the doctor. You're basically practicing under the doctor's license with authorization to carry out certain highly specialized and controlled skills, including drug admin and fibrillation and all that. Okay? The ALS and BLS comes as no surprise. We talked about this last week. You should have it on your computer. You should be looking at it. They will look at those to say, did you do your job properly? They definitely will look here. As you get into more advanced stuff, they will look there as well. And the lawyers look there now too. They didn't used to. They would just look and go, did they take the patient to the hospital? And if the answer was yes, they went, darn. But now, they're going in and they're reading this stuff, and they're looking at it, and they're looking at your patient chart, and they're like, huh, kind of looks like we might be able to get one on this BLS standards thing here, because they didn't do what they were supposed to do. Yep.
So what's the hierarchy of these scopes practices?
We'll get into that. Licensure versus certification. So certification as a paramedic comes from the base hospital. You, sometime in 4th semester, in part of your hiring by a service, will have to go and do base hospital testing. At that testing, they will do an OSCE like we do here, and they will test you on the things that you need to know to be a paramedic. And then if you pass, then you're base hospital certified with that service. If you don't pass, you will probably lose the job and will maybe have to do it again until you do pass or they get fed up with you. The other thing you're going to have to do, another certification, is your AMCA. That comes in June, in the same year that you graduate. There's a write then, and then they write it again in the fall. I think Mike mentioned it already to you that nobody fails the AMCA in this program. At least nobody is allowed to tell anyone that they failed. The last 15 years, we've had 0 failures. And our score on that MCAT is like an 86, and the rest of the province, everyone else is the average is 76. So you kind of can see where we're heading with what we're teaching. But there's those 2 pieces of certification that you'll need in order to be a paramedic. The AAMCA is so you can be a paramedic in Ontario. The base hospital certification is so that you can work for a certain service, Toronto or Durham or York, under that base hospital license as a PCP or whatever level of certification they happen to be certifying you for at the time. A license is a little different. A license is a little bit more advantageous because you carry it with you. As we get into the base hospital stuff and the licensing stuff out there, people that are working and have a college, governing college like nurses, they get a license, a nursing license. They take that license with them wherever they go, and they can pick and choose where they want to work. You guys cannot, because if you wanted to work in Simcoe, now you have to get base hospital certification up there. But a nurse that works at Scarborough Hospital Network or Scarborough Health Network down here could work at Centenary and then pick up a job somewhere up in Simcoe or in Barrie at Royal Vic, pick up a part-time job up there, and wouldn't have to go and get another license. The other advantage to that is that person with the license can actually delegate skills to another person. You cannot. You can ask somebody of a similar skill to do certain things, but I can't go around and say, okay, this is what you're going to do. Okay, we'll get more into how that actually works. We'll get more into the state of the healthcare system. We'll get more into what I see as the problem with our healthcare system. And this actually causes an issue for paramedics. If you had your own college in paramedicine and your own license, it would actually help to fix some of the components of the healthcare system. Everybody's heard how they're closing emergency departments, right? Sometimes for weeks on end. Well, the way I envision it, it's not about doctors. Our society is so struck by doctors, it's ridiculous. Yeah, it's an achievement, 4 years of medical school. Yeah, great. You're a fucking human being, you're not God. Okay? And so I don't look at doctors the same way the rest of society does. And anyhow, all you hear is, we need more doctors, we need more doctors, we need more doctors. More doctors is not the solution to the problem. It is true that 18% of people in Ontario do not have a family physician or primary care physician. That's true. But more doctors is not necessarily the solution to what is actually going on. All right? The closure of the emergency department is more about a staffing thing. If it was possible to put paramedics in there, and it's because of this you can't. But if it was possible to put paramedics in there, it would be possible to keep that emergent, the way I see it. We run an antiquated medical system in this province, and that's part of the problem. It's all money and doctors, and unfortunately, that's not the fix. Does anybody have a family member that's a doctor? Because you can tell when I said that. I don't care. Highway Traffic Act. Highway Traffic Act applies to you every time you drive the ambulance. You share some liability associated with driving. And just because you have that 2-month-old infant that's very sick and might die and you have to rush the sick kids, it does not mean that you can ignore the rules of the road. It does not mean you can run a red light. It doesn't mean that you can run down the sidewalk in downtown Toronto. That's why the sidewalks, because the traffic jams are so bad. Anyways, so if you hit somebody in the intersection after not stopping at a red light, and you caused an accident, you caused that car to crash into a bus shelter, killing 10 people. All of them brothers and sisters. You would be liable for that. And so you're measured here. The other one here is that, you know how when you do something wrong in your car, they're nice enough to give you points? It's a reward. You ran down a pedestrian, here's 6 points. You went through a red light, here's 6 more points. It's like a fucking video game. But the only problem with that is the more points you get, the less likely you'll be able to stay a paramedic. Because it says it right in the Ambulance Act, how many demerit points you're allowed to have on your license. So if you have too many demerit points, when you go to apply for a job, you will not get that job. And so your liability and what you do when you're driving the ambulance as a paramedic can affect your personal life, your ability to drive, your job, and your own insurance. Because if you get charged with something and you get points, it goes on your driving record. Your insurance company looks at it and goes, you got that many points? Your insurance is going down. Right? They might even turn around and say you get the facility rate, which is like $3,000 to $5,000 a year just for auto insurance. Right? Similar to renting a car. The insurance that you get when you rent a car is basically at the facility rate with a lot of non-covered things. Right? Mandatory reporting. We already talked about this one, Child in Need of Protection Act. It's in the BLS, and there's an act. It applies to professionals, and it applies to lay people. So if someone's peeping out their curtains in their living room and watching the neighbor beat the shit out of their 9-year-old son, they have to call. They can go to jail for not calling, especially when they find out that they were peeping through the curtains. Okay, so it doesn't only apply to you, it applies to everyone. Domestic and elder abuse, sexual assault, shootings and stabbings, animal bites, and communicable diseases. Communicable diseases, as you can see during COVID, changed the landscape of reporting illnesses and things in society. I think people became more sensitive to, somebody sneezed or you coughed, and people would jump like for their lives, like you're on fire coming down the street. I did an experiment. There was a long lineup. We were lined up. I said, watch. I said to my wife, I said, watch what happens. I stood in the line. I sneezed, and I went, oh, the body aches, the headache, and we kept moving up in the line because people thought I was fucking infectious. I'm like, yeah, I can play that game. It works at the airport too, except you might not get on a plane to be able to do it. You know that they frown upon at the airport is if you're standing there near security and you yell really loud to say hi to your friend Jack, who's across the way. Hi, Jack! And then they arrest you. Like, I'm just saying hi to my friend. Poor Jack. There's 81 communicable diseases that are have mandatory reporting. COVID is now one of them. The requirement is in there that if you know you have it, you have to say so. Right? So HIV and AIDS, there's a whole bunch of rare ones. COVID is in there. But the requirement is there because of the etiology in which the diseases work. It puts other people at risk. There's a risk for transmission, and there's a risk for other people to get sick because of how those diseases were caught in the first place. So even West Nile virus is in there. So some are fairly nasty and some are just annoying, but those are on there. So what that means to you as a paramedic is if you pick up a patient that's got one of those 81, if you don't find out immediately that the patient has that, maybe they tell you, maybe they don't. Maybe the hospital will help you with that, but most certainly public health will be calling you to tell you, or the department, that the patient you picked up at such and so has TB. You need to go get tested. Okay? So those are the mandatory reported things. That one too. I don't know who the hell would hide a traffic accident where somebody died. I mean, you just stand there and go, nothing to see here, nothing to see here. When your head comes away from your neck, it's usually over, but no. It's okay. Protection for the paramedic. We're not talking about PPE. So the infectious diseases reporting, those mandatory reporting of certain diseases, is there to protect you. Hopefully you find out in time. Hopefully it doesn't take days and days because you could infect your entire family, kill all your brothers and sisters. Everybody in your family's now dying of leprosy and TB, and then they go, oh, by the way, the patient you picked up 2 weeks ago had leprosy and TB, and thank you very much for that, right? I'm kind of dark, actually. It comes from dealing with the death and the stuff I saw. I told you, no paramedics see things that no person should ever see, no human being should ever see. I told you that already, right? Still want to stay in this program? Okay. Immunity statutes. There's not many immunity statutes and Good Samaritan laws that really apply directly to paramedics because the problem is there's a duty to act. If you're acting as a paramedic, you've got a duty to respond and a duty to take care of the person on the other end. You're not really allowed to just go, I don't feel like it today. Can't do it. But one of the immunity things that is out there, it relates to COVID, and it's an example because there's probably others, but this is the one I found because I like to give some examples of things. The immunity statute is, if you contracted COVID and went to work and didn't know that you had COVID, and maybe you transmitted it to other people, or maybe you made a patient sick, they can't come back to you because you did not have a diagnosis. You didn't know at that time. And it's possible when you're a frontline healthcare worker that you are going to see patients that have signs of COVID. Anybody book a dentist appointment in the past few years and you have to fill out that pre-screening shit? I complained to them about what it said in ours, at least the one I had. It says, have you been exposed to anybody that has symptoms, signs and symptoms of COVID or has been tested positive for COVID? Well, if I'm a paramedic and I took care of somebody that has COVID, then I have to say yes, and then they're going to cancel my appointment. I said that, you can't do that. You have to say without appropriate PPE on. And then the people that will answer that question, that I didn't have PPE on, they'll know. The layperson that doesn't get it won't fucking matter. So they changed it. And if you see your dentist, you should say the same thing to them. Because that form is wrong. You're expecting me then to lie and say, no, even though I did see somebody because I'm answering the question. OCD. It's just Good Samaritan laws. Good Samaritan laws more apply to people that you're standing outside the bus shelter out here and somebody beside you collapses and is in a cardiac arrest. And you do CPR on that person. The Good Samaritan law, if the family comes and says, you caused their heart to stop, the Good Samaritan law will protect you there because you were just acting reasonably and in good faith. You didn't try to do anything. You didn't knock them down. You just went, oh my God, this looks like a cardiac arrest. You call 911 and CPR. Right? That's what that's for. Not really for paramedics. Some first responders in these really distant northern communities, this stuff would play more on them because they may not even have an epic. Right? They're so hard up for people up there that they will just take people that are willing to kind of volunteer as a first responder to hope for the best. Base hospital physician has malpractice insurance. So you wouldn't necessarily be covered under them as much as they'll be covered for themselves, but you'll be covered by the department. The department has liability insurance. So it's very rare for paramedics to actually be sued by a plaintiff, an ex-patient, or the family individually. It's very rare for that to happen. It's not to say that it couldn't happen. It's not to say that it wouldn't one day potentially happen. Generally speaking, what ends up happening is when there's a problem, they sue the department that you work for. All right, and it's easier to get them to pay up than it is to get you to pay up. And in fact, the city of Toronto has a slush fund for most lawsuits. They just pay out. Avoid going to court. Court is far too expensive. Most of the payout gets eaten up with lawyers' fees. Where I missed my calling, I should have been a goddamn lawyer. Right? But then my family members would probably want to kill me. Remember what's a good start? A good start is 10,000 dead lawyers at the bottom of the ocean. You like lawyers. Service operating procedures. Standard operating procedures, SOPs. In there, there's going to be things that you will see when you're working that align directly with some of the legislation and the BLS and the Ambulance Act, and municipal code and human rights, and all these different things. They're basically there that if you follow the SOPs and the BLS standards and the ALS, and you follow your assessment protocols, you do it yourself, you're not going to get in trouble. You really aren't. Right? The liability threshold is very, very low. Did I get complaints lodged against me? Of course. It's gonna happen. Did they say I was incontinent or no, incompetent? One of them you're pissed, the other one you're not. One depends, the other one not. One of them you're in for it, the other one you're not. Anyways. Did I ever get sued? No. Did the department get sued as a result of anything I did or didn't do? No. Listen, if I can do it. Regulated Health Professions Act, we'll talk about this in a few weeks. This is where these controlled medical acts start to come out of, and who can do stuff. We kind of are, but we aren't because we're not actually a regulated health profession. They've kept us in the base hospital system and the union. We don't have a college of paramedicine in Ontario. Should we? I think we should. There's a lot of argument why we shouldn't. Having said that, I think it's better for the advancement of the profession and for the advancement of healthcare. It comes more in line with the demands that are on paramedics these days. When I did the course, it was about the most serious, worst thing that you could ever see. Trauma, they're dying, whatever. Now, you're dealing with subacute cases. You're dealing with people that just need enough health care so they can stay in their homes. So you're not dealing with the, oh my God, this is the worst thing that's ever happened. You're dealing with, yeah, this happens like twice a month, and you guys come here, you make me better, and I don't go to the hospital, and I like it that way because the hospital's fucked. And it's probably better for the healthcare system if people don't actually go in the hospital. So you see how the job is morphed, that I think regulation is more the way to go now than it ever has been, but we'll see if that actually happens. Because it's money. Money. These guys are like a money. They get paid by the paramedic that they certify. They get a lot of money, right? So immunity, again, there was the COVID thing, okay? But this basically is, you can't take action for proceedings for damages and institute them against any member or employee for an act done in good faith in the performance of the intended performance of their duty and the exercise and intended exercise. I love the way they write this stuff. I just love it. So basically, they can't just come after you willy-nilly for everything if you're acting in good faith. And if you're performing your duty or exercise your stuff the way you're supposed to, then no, they can't. They can't just come and willy-nilly sue you. So what this says is that, as long as you do things properly, you're fine. when you start to cut corners and not do things properly, put people at risk, then you're gonna get in trouble. But that sounds like it's almost just about everything, right? Legal accountability. Reasonable, so it's responsible to act in a reasonable and prudent manner. All right, that's an important legal measure right there. Care that is inconsistent with your education and training, so that's what we're trying to do here. Negligence could result in legal accountability and liability, and they look at your standards now. So up here, what that means is reasonable and prudent is what would some other paramedic do in the same or similar circumstances? So it's another paramedic of same level of training and education. What would they do or have done in the same or similar circumstances? And if they say, you didn't meet that standard, it's not reasonable, then you're probably gonna have a problem. Down here, has any paramedics ever been charged with negligence in the province of Ontario? And it'll be two or three section. So if yes, where? If yes, where and how many?
I just want to say yes in Hamilton because I saw the title of one of your documents.
Hamilton. Do you know what the problem with Hamilton is? Fucking stinks. The Stelco plant, you can see it right off of the QW. Stelco plant makes Hamilton smell like rotten eggs all the time. It's supposed to be the smell of prosperity. I think it's the smell of something else that comes out from the back of my front. And the other thing with Hamilton is it's got a lot of one-way streets. And there's a permanent black dust cloud that sits over the town permanently. Even when it rains, the raindrops are black soot. It's a miserable, depressing town. Everybody there walks around and they're all covered in soot. Anybody from Hamilton?
I lived there for 4 years.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Can we master breads?
Can we master?
Good. A few years ago, there was a whole bunch of people in the room that were actually from Hamilton. And they were like, that's not fair, that's not nice. I'm like, oh, it's fucking nice, I've been to Hamilton. So, there's actually two stories. I'm trying to do them quick. First one, there was a patient. Always involves a patient. I have to start the story, but there was a patient. There was a patient who was known, frequent flyer. One of these guys was an alcoholic, probably lived alone, had some psychosocial issues, maybe some mental health issues. He was one of those ones that would call ambulance frequently, go to the hospital, cause a problem in the hospital, and get kicked out. So it was not really even necessary for this person to go in the ambulance, but you were taking him anyways. On this night, sure enough, patient drank too much. Paramedics came, took him to hospital. He started something at the hospital, got kicked out. I think they gave him a taxi chip, and the taxi dropped him off near his house. Short time later, he hadn't gone in his house. He's outside, probably creating a ruckus. Somebody else called 911. Hamilton police came. The police officer was night shift, so they were covered in soot by this time. There he is. He walked with a cane or two, ambulatory issues. Drunken, angry, old guy. I don't see anything wrong with that. It's not, as long as you're not the drunken, angry old guy in underwear, I think you're entitled to be at that. And when you're old and you can't walk, you can be angry. Like, just fucking swing your cane and hit people. Young people fucking take care of their knees. I think that's what I'm gonna do. Right? Augusto accuses me of being old. I'm like, just wait. Just wait. I said, just wait till I come in here and I'm teaching legal, and I have a walker, right? And then I talk, and you guys don't even understand me because I just swear and my dentures don't fit, right? And then I'll pause and smile because my hands are getting filled, and then just continue. Right? That's what I'm planning. I said, you want to see what it's like when somebody's like really old working here? I said, let's go. Do you think Bob Barker was old? Wait. Okay, you know, in The Price is Right, you have to stay under $1. Just wait and see how long I stay under $1. So you've got this guy, okay, and the police are interacting with him. Hamilton sends a first response paramedic, PCP, because the only service in the province that runs ACP response units is Toronto. So when I said I worked on a response unit, it was ACP response, it was a PCP response. So this guy arrives, immediately sees that it's this person that he detests, and he thinks the patient is a fucking asshole, and so he says so. You're a fucking asshole. So the patient goes, oh yeah, and swings the cane at the guy, and kind of lunges forward, and the Hamilton cop pushes the guy down to the ground. The patient lands against the cement wall and is positioned so that his head and shoulders are against the wall, so but it's bent forward like that. The paramedic never touches the patient, never assesses the patient, never positions the patient, never does anything. The patient dies sometime later. Something is called into question about what happened on this call, and a complaint is made, goes to the Ministry of Health. The Ministry of Health has Emergency Health Services investigators, which are POOs, Provincial Offences Officers. They can write you a ticket. They investigate. And there's been a change in that office over the past few years. They actually come and they really investigate, and that's what they did. And so they dinged this guy for failing the duty to act, negligence, abandonment, and not following the BLS, took away his NCRED. Bye-bye job. Second example, unfortunately for Hamilton, there's a friggin' vortex loose in Hamilton. In amongst that dark cloud of dust, there's some spinning vortex of air, and another thing happens. So in Hamilton, there's a fight. Good Samaritan wants to stop the fight. Someone pulls a handgun, which turns out to be a pellet gun later on. But as far as I'm concerned, a handgun's a handgun, whether it's a toy, a pellet gun, or the real fucking thing. You pull it out, you're intending to use it, you're intending to intimidate, and the police can shoot you. That's another argument. But in this case, this guy pulls the trigger at the Good Samaritan, and some people think it was an actual .22 or whatever, but the paramedics, when they get there, they're told he was shot. And they're like, you're panicking, fucking calm down, stop this nonsense, you're overreacting, and don't assess him. There's an old saying from a long time ago, before I became ACP, don't minimize like BLS. Okay? Because back then, there was BLS and there was ALS. Basic lifting service, basic life support, and advanced lifting service, advanced life support. PCP, BLS, ACP, ALS. So don't minimize like BLS. This is one of those things, when I say ethical, this is where paramedics start to behave unethically. They go in and they look at you and they go, this is fucking bullshit, I'm not going to assess you. Well, what the fuck do you know? What? How do you know what you're going to find under that rock unless you turn the damn thing over? You have to do patient assessment, okay? Don't get caught up in that. So, these two guys, and there's witnesses. There's lots of witnesses because they're doing most of this right out in the open. Okay? That's the other bad thing about what they did is not only did they decide to behave badly, they decided to behave badly in the front of a whole shitload of witnesses. If you're going to behave badly, at least do it inside the ambulance where nobody really knows what the fuck you're doing. Like, really? So anyways, this guy was actually shot with the pellet gun. right? When you think a pellet gun can't hurt you, it killed him. But it leaves such a small, like less than a centimeter wide opening. It would look like a real little red pimple. The wound would be that small. But once it's inside your chest, and it pops your lung, and maybe severs a vessel, you're fucked. I can tell you that these two clowns did not go to this school because they would have known better. I know they would have known better because I teach PhD3, and I know I teach this. Okay? So that guy died because they didn't assess the patient properly. They minimized the situation. They failed to act upon the expectations and the standard that would have been in there should they have found the injuries. All that. Again, those two lost their AMCA, and I think one of them was either given probation or was supposed to go to jail, or maybe they just said, you know, you should go to jail, but we're gonna not put you in jail. Sometimes they do that. Anyways, so both cases in Hamilton, negligence. Well, you can see in both of the cases, if you had just bloody well done what you were told to do, none of this would have been a problem. It seems like an easy conversation to have. We probably wouldn't be having it had it not happened. But you get the point. Somebody, somewhere, once. Okay, these ones are good to know. Components of negligence, right? Duty to act, breach of duty, damage to the patient, and proximate cause. Duty to act. So you are required to respond and render care, right? One of those things you'll hear about is paramedics refusing to go on a call. Yeah, we got a call for you, so. No, I don't want to go on a call, right? You get that. And you have to go and give care. So you can't just go there and just stand there and say, I'm not doing anything. Obey the laws and regulations as they're pertaining to the response to the call and when you're there. Operate your emergency vehicle reasonably and prudently, I said that. Provide care and transportation to an expected standard in the DLS standard. Provide care and transportation consistent with the scope of practice and protocols. So in here, your care and transportation, there's a transportation standard, a patient transportation standard, and then your scope of practice will fall under whether you're PCP, ACP, or CCP. And then protocols is right out of the ALS. And then continue care and transportation through to its appropriate conclusion. So you can see here, it's like from the beginning of the call to the very end of the call. You're required as a duty to act to do all that stuff on a continuous and ongoing basis. You can't just, yeah, I had lunch, I don't care, okay? Breach of duty is when your standard of care hasn't been met. And as you can see in the Hamilton instance, that was established by eyewitnesses in court testimony that said, no, they never did that. I never saw them pull out a stethoscope and listen to that man's chest that they apparently shot. I never saw that. But that would be the first thing I would do. Oh, you think you've been shot? Oh, okay, let's get you in the ambulance, and let's get your shirt off so we can have a look at you. Huh? How's that sound? Okay, and put him in the ambulance, get him onto bed. Okay, my partner, you're gonna start vital sign. Okay, sir, I'm just gonna listen to your breathing. Okay, do you have any difficulty with that breathing? I'll listen to it. All right, let me look at your chest. Come on, shine the light on there. Oh, look at that. Look at that, there's a little red mark there, right? Easy peasy, man. That is easy. So easy to avoid getting in trouble on that call. So easy. Okay? They complicate it for themselves. Also references to published code standards and criteria and guidelines. So the plaintiff, the Crown attorney, will probably pull out the DLS, your ALS, your medical directives. They will pull out any other known standards for dealing with penetrating injuries and anything else they want to hang with, and they will talk about that in court. So they will look to the expected or anticipated standard of care. Know these three, know the differences of them, so that you can identify when they come up. Breach of duty may occur by malfeasance. So if you look at the prefix there, those three letters, mal is bad, wrong, right? This one here, unlawful act, wrongful or unlawful act. So you did something bad. Misfeasance, okay, you did something that was harmful. So there's an I in there, it's injurious, injuries, harmful. And then non, you didn't do something, you failed to perform, right? That's the best way to remember those, know that. I'm not gonna say it again. Did the patient suffer any compensable injuries? There was a wrongful death in Hamilton. I'm sure that Hamilton's probably had to pay out twice now for what their employees did, but certainly there. But it could be that the patient now requires medical expenses, that maybe they need a wheelchair, maybe they need a ventilator, maybe they need a personal support worker, who knows? So they might get medical expenses as part of their lawsuit. Maybe they lost their job because they can't work in a wheelchair anymore, right? So do that. And then the pain and suffering one, which is that subjective thing that they will try and push, which does kind of, because people feel sorry, you know, you shouldn't have a toothache, so you're not there. So that will then come up. Now, depending on how the lawsuit goes, I can't say whether the 3 paramedics that got dinged in Hamilton are still before the courts, if there's any civil proceedings going on there. I will say there is a website that you can go, and anything that goes to court becomes public domain, and you can see the results of the judiciary findings. Even the Human Rights Tribunal, they post on there too. So anything that goes on there, if it's settled out of court, you won't see it. But if it goes to court, as soon as it hits court, boom, it pops up on this. It's called CAN, C-A-N, Canada Legal Information, LII. You can go on there, you can look up stuff, see what people have been sued for, and the damages. I'd be interested to look in there in the next while, see if that ever ends up coming up. Because I would suspect that this wrongful death thing, either the city of Hamilton, that region, will have to pay, or both paramedics, the 2 paramedics, and they may have to as well. But that's where the, you know, that's where court is. And then there could be punitive damages, that just because, right, this stuff up here could be worth $10 million, right? And then you get down here and they award another $200 million in punitive damages because they're just pissed off at you. And that's what happened to R.J. Reynolds. Okay? Their punitive damages, the payout on that was so significant it threw them out of business. Right or wrong, that's how it works. Does anybody need a break? I see some hands going up. Let's do it. 10, 2, 2. 10 minutes, 14:50.
Basically, like, just to get this right? Like, the patient is already suffering damages because of these reasons, right? So she's already getting paid here. Punitive damage means like
It's just actually just like because you're dealing with the situation. There's compensation for just being there.
dealing with. Did you see this live show yet? This one has more information on here. Keep on more on here.
Oh, on the notes?
Yeah. It is good, but to be fair, like, he's already talking over it all.
Yeah.
Well, maybe say, for instance, let's put it this way.
But it is him.
So you have a patient.
It's actually very easy to know. Mouth fitness is like cardiac act, wrongful act. Miss is causing injury, and you're not like, nah, I don't want to do it my way. Nah, I don't want to do it this way.
So instead of putting in oral pharyngeal, you find a hair line, you stick it in the patient's mouth. That would be the best.
Thursday morning. I had to go that one.
If you had somebody with
I don't know Friday.
an injury,
Oh yeah?
I feel like the note taking for this is definitely
More in therapeutics.
way more.
It's because what he does is he likes to give, unlike Amy, he adds in more stuff that aren't on the slides. He talks more that aren't on the slide, and then after that, Amy just reads off the, like, she literally had to criticize, she reads off of it the whole time.
And like Dave, like he gives like examples and stuff.
which are actually pretty helpful.
It's what you did
And then,
do.
are you gonna do reading tonight for before tomorrow's lesson?
I'm gonna try.
I'm not gonna do it all. I meant to probably do like some of it, just to have like a brief understanding, and then after the other parts of it, I'll just like write down whatever he's telling me.
I'll probably just skim through it, see.
We'll skip here and there.
It's something you should know. You just cause them to be perfect.
I hope you at some point.
I'm sure we'll get to it.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, exactly.
If you fail any of the courses or lift tests and let's say like you have to redo the semester,
So basically,
you have to
with
reapply?
with the lift test, I think it's like if you fail the lift test, you had like another try in November.
and
Yeah,
if you fail that,
and then after it's done, you fail the program. So basically, you can already know if you fail the program if you fail your second try for lift test in November. And then after, if you fail that, you fail pre-hospital care, and then you fail. I think you fail anatomy because anatomy ties in with that.
do you have to reapply, or
I think you either reapply or they hold your spot in if you want to come back on state.
because if
Probably
you
hold your spot.
because reapplying it'll be a pain.
It'll be a pain. And after that, you can either get it or not get it.
Yeah.
I think they hold your spot though for next one. For like back in September, which means like you're probably either gonna be doing some classes in January, but not like all of them. It's a lot more note taking though. Just fun though. At least keeps you focused. I'm gonna highlight this shit now.
It's like, or the halfway house.
But then paramedics should know what they did wrong. This is something you didn't know that you're wrong or unlawful act. So you only LPA or very aware when you put in her person instead. Right? And then misfeasance is a legal action which is hard for the jury. So basically that one is the one that what you did was right, but it wasn't legal in that situation. You gave the wrong drug.
What do you end up saying?
You have the wrong drug, and then the other one is just you failed to do something like
No time. It'll be them. That no, then it'll be us.
Thanks,
the way it
Gordon.
was in real life. By combining advanced computational photography with the 48 megapixel main camera, ultra-wide camera, and true-depth front camera, iPhone 15 makes it easy to take great-looking photos and videos every day. And it's all powered by Apple's Silicon. Back to Cayenne. To deliver all of these advanced features, iPhone 15 has an incredible chip, A6 Bionic. It was introduced on iPhone 14.
There's like, I think I have like 5 questions that
The
you can have
custom
a look
image
at.
signal processor enables the advanced camera system, so you can capture fantastic high-resolution photos and videos. The 16-core neural engine handles everything
you
from
gave the wrong
computational
drug,
photography to live voice.
if you gave the wrong drug, that would be malfeasance. If you give an incorrect drug, that would be malfeasance. If you just fail to perform like the proper act, that would not. And then if you say gave a wrong, what would be harmful or injury?
Is it something? Would it be actually you doing the harmful stuff?
I think that would be.
Then what type of stuff would paramedics be doing?
They prescribe the medication and intentionally give the incorrect dosage.
So
So basically,
would it still be? Would it fall under both of them?
yeah, so that fall under both malfeasance and misfeasance, right? So basically, I guess, they're both the same. I guess like giving like the wrong drug can tie it to both, but instead this one is just you doing it incorrectly, and then this one can cause harm. Meanwhile, this one is just you're just fucking just doing
Yeah.
it
So
wrong.
if you give like let's say the wrong like
Dosage or the wrong drug,
and it doesn't like harm them,
that's
then that's just not. But if it does, then it's under both.
It's under both.
Okay.
And after that, non-facial is basically you say failing to perform required activities. You're just failing to perform a proper standard intubation.
Yeah.
This is light, bro. Light work. we have 3 more slides, and then we have to do this one as well.
The second
And
slide.
we had the Personal Health Information Protection Act. 12 slide, man.
I haven't heard. I know some second, graduates bringing stuff in the cell. But I haven't. I joke we had him already. If he ordered them last week. That's your fault, Lloyd. Grant. Hamilton. Oh, Phil. Even worse. I know. It's like there's Hamilton and then there's Oakville. They aren't good at Hamilton.
That's the worst place.
Yes. I know. And he was driving back and forth.
I think we got to like 2, I think.
That's the drive to Western. It's like only far from Yeah, but McMaster's like in a nicer part of town. You go downtown Hamilton, it's worse than it's worse than Regent Park. Oh, yeah.
Not as bad as what.
pedestrians into a north-south street. So stay away from that area. St. Joe's, Shield, High Park.
Share that information with a roadside assistance provider. They'll message you directly and dispatch help to your exact location.
Whenever I cross the street, they just pull me over and ask me
It's
to
live in the US, AAA, the country's largest roadside assistance provider. Roadside service is covered by AAA membership.
What are you doing here?
Also available
Trying to
separately.
go to the airport. No excuse. Business.
Yet another way iPhone is essential in our lives. Now, back to Cayenne.
Ready?
We're thrilled to include access to
Malfeasance, wrongful or unlawful act. You guys haven't covered this yet in PAC 1, but there's things called airway adjuncts. There's one that's called an oropharyngeal airway. Augusta will teach you that when you do airway management. But the example is that the OPA is necessary to hold patient's airway open. It's an indicated thing, but you didn't bring your equipment in. So on the patient's dresser, you grab a hairbrush and you stick it in the patient's mouth to hold their airway open. That's the wrong thing. It's an unlawful act to do that. Misfeasance is you've done something which is legal, but it is harmful or injurious, and it's administering the wrong drug and you knew that you shouldn't do it. And the patient suffers harm as a result of this. Or you try to give the right drug by the wrong way. So instead of sticking it in the arm, you stick it in their eyeball. And then when that happens, the needle won't come out. And so they have to walk around with a syringe sticking out of their eye for the rest of the way. Harmful injury. Non-feasance. You fail to perform the required act or duty. This is what those paramedics got in shift for. Okay? A ton of people ask on that turn of break. What I wish is that people that had questions like that would actually ask them and put up their hand in the class, because then I know and I can go over that with everybody. Okay? Because if you think it, there's probably 10 or 12 or more people thinking the same thing. And at the break, I probably got about 6 people that asked the exact same thing that we could have gone over in class like I just did. Okay? Please don't hold back. It's not about being embarrassed. If you're thinking it, think about it as a first. Is it a reasonable question? The reasonable part is if I don't understand what the definitions mean or if I'm not clear, right, we can go over it. I don't have a problem with that. But it's a lot harder to do it at break when 5 people in a row ask the same kind of question. Anyways, we did that. Malfeasance. Mr. Feasance, Mrs. Feasance, uncle and auntie Feasance.
Yeah, so still coming back to the example.
This one, okay, go ahead.
Coming back to the example with the hairbrush. So that if you don't have anything and you have to, let's say, keep the airway open, and you don't use the brush or whatever, will it be
Toothpick.
So it's more about the object rather than the.
Don't try to, it's the act. It's act. What you did is not to standard. It's that you did something to do patient care, that's not to standard. It wasn't to what was allowed. That's the best example I can think of at the moment. Okay? But don't switch it to say, okay, we'll take that and now switch it. Now you're gonna confuse yourself. Stick with those 3, keep it that way, and go with that. Because all you need to do is understand where they're applied, how they get there. This is how prescriptive court proceedings are and how much they break things down into little pieces and components so that they can determine that. All right? Because when you're looking at potentially awarding millions and billions of dollars to somebody when a tort could be multiple thousands of people, if you're looking at awarding damages, you need to be clear on what happened, how it happened, who it happened to, how much you're getting versus what she's getting, right? It is beyond the scope of this, right? So just understand what they are and know that it all stems back to negligence. It all comes out of negligence. But they like to break it down in, did you do something illegal, did you fail to do something, or did you miss something? For whatever reason, and they came up with these Latin fucking names, and they all sound the same, and it's like, great, thanks for nothing. But 10,000 dead warriors at the bottom of the ocean. Yes,
So tort doesn't encompass criminal law also, like,
civil,
civil?
Civil.
So for assault, that would be.
assault, is assault criminal or civil?
Criminal.
Could you sue somebody civilly for an assault?
No.
Might be able to. Might. I can think of an example. Paramedic was assaulted right here at Centenary by a patient that came running out of the emerge, punched him right in the face, knocked him unconscious in the driveway. Patient has a mental health issue. You're not gonna win the lawsuit, I can tell you that right now. If they have a mental health issue, you're gonna lose. Okay? But he could have sued. So if it was one of us, you punch him, you're gonna get charged with assault, you get charged with assault criminally, and then later on you can go and civilly sue for medical damages, pain and suffering, lost time at work, maybe I ran out of sick time, whatever. Okay?
It can just be upgraded to civil to criminal.
Doesn't get upgraded, no. No, they're independent of each other. So proximate cause. Was the action or inaction of the paramedic the cause of or worsened the damage? Okay, and was it likely foreseeable? All right, and there usually involves expert testimony. So a good example is you were running lights and sirens, maybe you were driving a bit too fast, and the light changed to red, and you went through the red light without stopping, and then you collided with the vehicle, and you sent that vehicle flying across the intersection, and it crashed into some pedestrians. So they can say, you should have known that the light was going to change, you should have altered your driving, maybe driven slower. The action of the paramedic worsened the damage, right? So you caused the car to crash into the pedestrians. If you had to run the red light, that never would have happened. And then the expert testimony would probably come from somebody that would explain the physics of what happened. If she's far away, it jumps there. So defenses to negligence. So the first two are very weak as far as the paramedic profession goes. The Good Samaritan law, it's your job. You have a duty to act and respond. So that doesn't really come up. Maybe if you were on your days off, that would change. Governmental immunity, that doesn't necessarily protect you as much as who you work for. So we'll use the City of Toronto as an example. The City of Toronto has certain immunity to hiring you, and if you're negligent, they are not responsible for the criminal acts that you maybe carry out or whatever that you've done. There's certain limited things there. Statute of limitations. All complaints, all legal things have a statute of limitations. There's a few that don't exactly, and you can kind of figure them out on your own. But things like harassment complaints, it's about 6 months. So if you think you're being harassed in the workplace and you say something a year later, it's like, sorry, that incident happened more than 6 months ago. Null and void. You're supposed to say it right away. Most things it's about 5 to 7 years, and then there's a few things that 50 years later they're both going and arresting people. So it depends on what the act was. That will determine the statute of limitations. Most services have to keep their paperwork for 5 to 7 years, and so basically that tells you what your statute of limitations are. Contributory negligence was similar to proximate cause. And basically, it's that the patient may have caused some of their own injury. All right, so if you were accused of something, and your defense team might turn around and say, okay, yeah, you didn't treat the fracture properly, but the patient would never have sustained the fracture if they hadn't have taken all those pills, causing them to become drowsy and fall down the stairs. Something like that. Okay? Liability insurance. The city has liability insurance, the regions have liability insurance. You can also get your own liability insurance. Nurses are kind of supposed to get their own liability insurance, especially if they're doing things that they're involved in private practice. But you can get insurance just by simply joining the Ontario Paramedic Association. The Ontario Paramedic Association holds a conference. There's a magazine that comes out, and there's a student chapter where I think you get a discount on the magazine, and you get the liability insurance, and they'll provide you with a lawyer. And it's even if it's a personal civil matter, they will give you a lawyer. So if your tree falls on your neighbor's house and they sue you civilly, they'll give you a lawyer. So you might want to look into it. The OPA. Paramedic medical director has liability insurance. They have to. Liability for borrowed servants. So students, volunteers, whatnot, are considered borrowed servants. Civil rights. And then there is off-duty paramedic. So special liability concern there is if you're off duty and you see an accident, do you stop for the accident and maybe render care, even if it's in a region that you don't work in and you're technically not working? I know the city of Toronto gave us off-duty liability protection that if we tried to render care anywhere in, I think it was anywhere in Canada, but certainly the province, off-duty, they would cover us. And I know of cases where paramedics have been up north, whether it would be camping or going to the cottage, because when you go up north from down here, that's all you ever do is you're there for vacation. Who the hell lives up north? Deer, moose, trees, like, come on. So they've been up north and there's been a bad traffic accident, and the ambulance that showed up had ACP equipment on it, and the person that was up there was off-duty ACP, and there was 2 PCP paramedics on the ambulance, and so they called Sunnybrook, long distance on the 1-800 number, and got permission to do ACP skills off-duty. It's about patient safety and saving lives. They're very liberal with how things go. When you start learning the medical directives, you'll kind of see there's a lot of stuff that we can do that is it's quite advanced stuff. So it's about providing the highest level of patient care that we can out there in every instance, and no one wanted to think, well, if that person was on scene, maybe that other person would have saved them. Their life would have been saved if we had allowed them to do their skill set. Okay, so how do you protect yourself? Education, training, and Con Ed, again, doing your CME. Following the medical directives properly, all right, in the first instance, if you follow the medical directives properly, you can't get in trouble, but you also need to know them well enough so that if the doctor, when you contact the base hospital, if they give you wrong information or tell you to do the wrong thing, you know that that's wrong and you can speak up. Okay? Because the doctors are human too. The doctors do make mistakes, and the doctors will not know your medical directives as well as you will. And you will know your medical directives so well by the time I'm done with you that you will be able to recite them by getting down in the hallway one day and just jump out from behind a post or something and tackle you and scream, "What's the medical directive for hypoglycemia?" And you'll start, and the other programs go, "Holy fuck, what's going on?" That's how we stop all the other people in the school from wanting to come into this program. We make them think that we're mean and abusive in here. So you just have to tell them, "Oh yeah, terrible. Beats us with a stick every day." Accurate and thorough documentation. You're protecting yourself by writing down exactly what happened. There's a saying out there for documentation: not written, not done. Lawyers love to go through documentation and nitpick everything you write and look for gaps. That's their thing. I know somebody that testified at a murder trial. It was on Christmas morning. It was over here at Nielsen Road in the 401, where a woman bought her husband some dumbbells for Christmas. And Christmas is kind of a funny thing for some domestic situations. And this guy, whatever, I don't know what she did, but he lost his shit. He took one of those dumbbells and he beat her head with it and killed her. The paramedics even said that on her forehead, they could see the imprint where it said Leader, the brand of dumbbells. At the trial, his defense attorney ripped apart the paramedics' paperwork and actually got asshole a little less time in jail. So you gotta be careful what you say. Okay. That's the only thing that's gonna protect you later on, if it ever comes up, if there's a question. Not written, not done. So if you have a conversation with a patient, it needs to be written down on here. If you give counsel to a patient on a refusal, it needs to be written down on there. If you're driving to the hospital and the drunken driver that just killed the family that was on their way home from church on Sunday morning, and he says something to you, you have to write it down on your ACR. Not documented, not done. Patient assessments, the same thing. They'll be looking at the patient standards, whether they were met. You've got to write it down. If you don't write it down, you know what happens. Professional attitude and demeanor. Number one complaint to the Ministry of Health is paramedic attitude. Can't go into it anymore, really. That's up to you. Sometimes it's hard to keep your professional attitude and demeanor. You'll get more respect from people out there than the person who comes in with a bad attitude and demeanor. I'll tell you that right now. I've walked into scenes on response. I'm coming down the hall. I used to carry a fucking backpack that we carried. The monitor, you see it, this old monitor is like 35 pounds. Backpack was 85 pounds. Had a little oxygen tank in it. Well, I mean, my shoulder. Come on. So I had one of them airline things. I put it on there, the trolley, and I come down the hall. And so there was a PCP crew on scene ahead of me, and I come down the hall, and I'm like, yeah, this is the apartment, and I'm listening at the door, and I'm like, there's fucking screaming on the other side. What the hell's going on in there? Like you could hear argument. I'm like, oh, here we go. Knock on the door. Hi, can I come in? Yeah. Oh, good to see everybody. Well, professional attitude and demeanor, within about 15 minutes, I diffused that scene. At the hospital, those guys came to me, was everyone buying me coffee, man? You saved us, man. They were gonna kill us. And I'm like, yeah, I could fucking tell they were gonna kill you. What the hell did you say? And anyways, they said something, and it didn't go over well with the family, and they lost their shit. But then the guy with the gray hair came in and made it all better. Okay? So that. Paramedic relationships. So there's confidentiality, and then there's this thing about consent. You need to know those for sure. Confidentiality, we'll talk specifically very much about this with PHIPAA, but you're going to find out things about people. I already said this to you in the first day. You're going to get inside people's world. You're going to get inside their house. You're going to get to see how they live. You're going to get to see the things that they have, good and bad. Kind of a funny story, just thinking about it now. It's Bayview, just north of Eglinton, on the east side of the street. This is the other curse I have. I remember exactly where I did the call. I even think I can say the faces of the people that were on the call with me, okay? Not everybody's like that, but I am. It's a fucking curse. Bayview and Eglinton, north of Eglinton, on the east side, there's low-rise apartments in there. Anyways, we get called for somebody deceased, it's code 5. So it means that we're not doing anything because he's been dead too long. So my partner and I are like searching the apartment for meds and identification, and I can hear my partner is in the guy's bedroom, and he goes, "Dave, get in here." And his name was Dave too. I'm like, "What?" He goes, "Get in here." He's got the closet door open. Books, magazines, kid porn. We're like, "What the? Holy fuck!" Okay, let's get out of here. Let's get out of here. So okay, the cops are here, fine, okay, yeah, you guys gotta go in there. We're like, yeah, that shit happens, man. It's like unbelievable. Like you would never think, right, in a place like that, well-to-do neighborhood, I mean, I guess it's happened anywhere, but that you walk in the middle of that, and it happens, right? So you're gonna see things, all right? Not gonna tell you his name, not gonna tell you his address, he's dead now anyways. Dead people have no rights. That's the one good thing. Dead people have no rights. That's why people do research on them, right? And there's an old saying, dead men tell no tales, right? So if you're dead, you can't come back and lie to us later on. So in the pirate world, that's why they'd rather have you dead than out there telling stories, right? Because you'll tell tales. And let's get on with this. The consent. What's expressed consent? Is it done quickly? This is up to you guys. Yes? It's done quickly? Like express post? Is that a hand or a stretch? Oh, here it comes. The hand is up.
It's like either verbally saying it or having it written in paper, but the person is fully saying, like, I consent to this.
Yeah. So they're indicating somehow. It can actually even be nonverbal. So I walk up to you and I say, "Can I take your pulse?" And you go like that. You didn't say yes, but you stuck your arm in. "I'd like to take your blood pressure," and you go like that because you've had your blood pressure taken before. You kind of know I need access to this part of your arm. Okay? So it's expressed. Patient is agreeing with whatever it is in some manner. Informed. Yes.
Like when you verbally ask them, like if you can do a particular action on them, and they say yeah.
No, that's expressed.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay. You were next, I think. A bunch of hands went up at the same time, but I think you were first in line.
When you explain something to a patient.
Right. So you explain why to the patient, the reasons, the rationale. I'd like to give you this medication because this is the risk benefits to it. The higher level of skill you have, and the more advanced skills that you have, especially when you get to an ACP skill, some of the medications that we give will literally stop the patient's heart in order to reset the conduction to its proper way. That's pretty severe shit. We can actually give a shock with a defibrillator, and it's called synchronized cardioversion. It's not like defibrillation, it's different. Does the same thing. You need to tell them what's going to happen. Because literally, it's gonna feel like I just came up to you with a bat and hit you in the chest with it. It's gonna hurt. Okay, but we have to slow down your heart. It can't beat like this for much longer. Informed consent. I'm telling you what's gonna happen and the reason why this needs to happen to you.
Is that where you have the piece of they have the knowledge that they can give or like, not give their consent as well? Is that part of the informed?
So I would go into the informed piece once they start to refuse something that I know is good for them. That's where I know stuff, so I'm gonna start teaching you, I'm gonna counsel you on why this is necessary. You can't just say no to me and I go, are you sure? Yeah, I'm sure. Really sure? Like if I say pretty please, like you see that? No, I'm gonna go, okay, so why are you telling me no? What's the problem? What are your concerns? There's a conversation, right? None of these things are a binary yes or no. It's a multifaceted thing that's gonna start to happen once the patient says no. Your heart's beating too fast, I know what I need to do for you, these are my standards, this is what I can do. You're saying no, now we're gonna have a conversation. And I'm gonna get my way, I know that, but it's gonna involve a lot of the information, right? And it's patient care specific, so it depends on the context of the situation, how that conversation goes, okay? Implied. What's implied consent? Yes.
An example would be if the patient is under the age of consent and primary,
Maybe.
or the patient not responsible.
Unresponsive is the big one, right? This patient needs intervention. This patient needs to have care given for them. They need assessment to determine why they're unconscious, and they don't have the ability to say no. Okay? There is some implied consent if it's a kid or underage and the guardian's not in seat, because basically you're the guardian, right? I'm the guardian of a kid if the kid is there and the guardian's not on seat. For whatever reason, I'm in charge now. So it is, but that's not really what we mean by implied consent. It's fairly close. We're not off that much, but we're out a little bit from the circle. Yeah.
Another example, not necessarily relevant to paramedic, but in a doctor's office, if they have a sheet that says, I think I'm kind of going back and forth between the HIPAA and,
Okay.
but if in a doctor's office it says, this is what we're gonna use your information for. X,
That's
Y, Z."
PMO. Yeah, they have to tell you, you'll see that when we talk about PMO, but they have to tell you what they're gonna use the information for. And you can say that I don't like that, and you can't do that, and then they have to pull you out of it. Involuntary. Doesn't sound like consent if it's involuntary, right? Sounds almost like something else that's not a pleasant thing, yeah?
Is it when they don't have a choice and like where that we can't decide if they can really care for themselves and we have to take them?
Okay, so, they don't have a choice, you're right. It may involve a situation where somebody can't take care of themselves, but it falls under something specific, an act, where this may come up. Okay? The Mental Health Act. So, in some cases, and we're gonna talk about the Mental Health Act in a few weeks. Everything that I mentioned, I promise I'll go over it. I will not let you down. The Mental Health Act has a clause in there where if a certain document is signed by a physician and there's an order for incarceration and the person needs assessment in the hospital, they have to go legally. They don't have a choice. It's not if, it's how you're going to the hospital. But like I said, we'll talk about that when we hit, because I don't wanna spoil the series by telling you what's gonna happen in the next episodes. It's like a movie. I already know what's gonna happen. You guys kind of are anticipating what's coming and then have these questions that I can't really get into now, because we are going to get into it. I know somebody mentioned, what was it? Delegated medical acts or something. Somebody was asking that, maybe in lab, I don't know, maybe you guys weren't in that section of lab. It came up, but that's another thing, we're gonna be talking about that. The skill set that people, what you are allowed to do that falls within your PCP skill set and where that is listed. Okay, and how that comes about, we're gonna talk about that. Special consent. So this might border on your thing a little bit. The legal age in Ontario is 16. Legal age, 16. Age of majority, where the person is considered an adult, 18. They're two different things. You need to understand them so that you can navigate this properly. So if I have a 16-year-old or a 17-year-old, they cannot legally sign my refusal form on the ACR in order to cancel. So if they don't want to go, too bad. You're going. You're legal, you can drive a car, but you cannot enter into a contract to buy one. So at 18, you're an adult. At 18, you can sign a contract. So at 18, you can go to the car dealership and buy a car. You could refuse to go to the hospital, but not at 16 or 17. This emancipation thing is a court-ordered thing that has that the parents and the kid don't want to have anything to do with each other. That kind of changes who can give consent or withhold it. All right. So if they're unemancipated, which is almost 100% of the cases, I never came across a single one where there's some 16-year-old walking around going, I do whatever the fuck I want, here's my paperwork. I have never come across that. And by my saying that, I'm not trying to say you will never see it, but there might be 1, 2 out there somewhere in the province full of 18 million people, okay? So don't get hung up on this, but when you have this situation, this emergency doctrine takes effect. And the doctrine takes effect where you can basically administer care to somebody because you know what's good for them and they don't know what's better for them. So if they have something and they're refusing to go to the hospital, but you know better based on your medical treatment, then you can override that. Question?
I thought there was no emancipation laws in Canada. Like, I know when you're 16, you can be kicked out or you can leave legally. And like the only emancipation thing is like.
Well, that's an emancipation though, because you have, if you get kicked out by your parents, you've been emancipated by your parents. Otherwise, it goes to the courts. So it kind of is. But like I said, out of everybody I've ever had dealings with, okay, I've never come across that situation where somebody is emancipated. Now, sometimes you get a kid that's in, should we say bye and say, so long, farewell. That's for some reason. Good luck with your TB. We hope there's no induration. It's an example of a subcutaneous injection, so when you're watching it, remember it for semester 2. The only kids that I ever came across that were in that age range there, that weren't living at home, where they were living in a group home, and the people in the group home were their guardians. They always sent somebody from the group home with them to the hospital if they had a seizure or they were hurt or something. This is sort of one of those gray areas that you don't see very often.
So an emancipated 16-year-old that doesn't have a guardian, can you still sign if they want to discharge? Or like?
No, they need
that's
someone
gonna
else.
be case dependent,
Yeah, so they still need
right?
somebody to
If
give
it-
consent
if
for
this
doctor,
doesn't
unless
apply,
they're fully in.
So somebody called, third-party caller says, I think there's something wrong with them, and there's nothing wrong with them, yeah, then you sign them. But if there's something medically wrong with them, this emergency doctor might call.
Okay, but if they're part of a group home, then they would.
They're the guardians, and generally speaking, they're pretty good, they'll call because something's happened. Group homes are, they're pretty good. Mentally incompetent adults, there should be a guardian on scene, hopefully there's a guardian. Again, that emergency doctrine applies when no one's available. You can provide the care that you deem necessary to stop them from dying, essentially. If you're in jail, and it might be your thing, because orange is the new black or something, I don't know, but the jail people or the police will authorize the emergency treatment. So, I mean, they called you, you just do your thing and treat accordingly. They say, it says here usually limited to saving life or limb. Any of the times I've been called to the jails, I've been in the Don jail, I've been to East Detention, and in the cells in the police stations, and they don't call unless it's bad. Okay, I just had the kid with the ruptured spleen after being assaulted, the one that took a sharpened toothbrush, they sharpened it down to a spike, and then they stabbed him, and then there was the heroin overdose that wasn't breathing in the cell. So it's like, yeah, I think all of those cases, right, none of them were bullshit. There was always a fracture or something. Refusal of care or transport. Patient must be conscious and able to make reasonable decisions. Okay, so anybody who's altered, got a GCS less than 15, anybody know what the GCS is yet? You might know, you're gonna learn that in PhD 1, but we'll see what it means. 15 is unaltered, and then it goes down from there. Make multiple attempts to convince the patient to accept care, enlist the help of others, ensure the patient is informed, consult medical direction if necessary, you don't have to. Have the patient sign and a disinterested party. So a disinterested party is somebody that doesn't really have a direct interest in whether the patient goes to the hospital or not. And so that can be a dynamic situation. Maybe there's a relative on scene that wants this person to be taken out of the home and put in a nursing home so they can move into the home. And sometimes, depending on how the situation is unfolding, it could even be considered your partner. But I try to get like a neighbor or some other kind of relative or a police officer, and they're just there to witness what I've said to the patient and the instructions I've given. They're not signing to agree with my decision or their decision. It's to say, you saw this, you heard me say these things. Because I'm going to write it on my ACR that I said these things, and now you witnessed that I did that. Because that's an important thing, because that will be called into question later on if the patient actually, somebody decides, oh, they should have gone to the hospital. Advise the patient they can always call back. Well, that's always a good thing, because some people think that they've already struck out after they've refused once, they can't call back again, and that's not true, they might as well call back. Especially if I'm refusing, if they're refusing and I really feel they should go, I would prefer that they call back. Get family and friends to stay with the patient. So it's good to have somebody that can stay with the patient and watch for them. They can help them call 911 should they become too ill to make it to the phone, which is another concern sometimes. You get these old people that they have hypoglycemia or low blood sugar, and then they go unconscious and can't get to the phone or whatever. And then the documentation. Your documentation is the most important thing on the cancellation, maybe even more important than on a regular patient encounter. You have to be very, very careful of the details that you have written out and how complete and thorough that documentation is. Abandonment. That can occur anywhere in the field or in the hospital. I personally think it's more likely to happen in the hospital. Where it happens really doesn't matter, but it's more likely, I think, to happen on paramedics in the hospital because care, the definitive care is there, it's available. There's doctors and nurses there. But we haven't transferred care, and that's that whole issue that we'll get into as the semester rolls out, to talk about this awful delay getting stuck with patients in the state of the healthcare system. So abandonment is more likely to occur in that situation, but it can also happen out in the field where, you know, you just go, you've called us 9 times today, that's it, you walk away from them, that's risky. You just leave them somewhere, maybe you hide them, drag the patient, not well, drag them under some, you know, hide them in bushes, and then maybe, who knows, right? A lot of weird things happen, but terminating care when it is still needed or desired by the patient, and without assuring that the appropriate care continues to be provided by a qualified provider. Think back to the example where you walked out of the hospital and left your patient with a security guard, to be an example of abandonment. False imprisonment, again, that's the taking somebody away without their consent. Obviously this one here, the mental health patient will always say that when they need to go under the Mental Health Act to the hospital, and yeah, that's fine, but that will never stick. But I've never known anybody to grab somebody off the street or see a patient. It's like, oh, you think you're not going? Oh, you're going, and then throw them on the stretcher. Never seen that, but I mean, who knows, right? There's a lot of weird shit that goes on. But transporting without consent or restraining without authority, only the police can restrain people. You technically can't, there's a little gray area too, I'm not gonna get into it, but you can't walk around with handcuffs and put handcuffs on patients or tie them down to the stretcher because they don't wanna go to the hospital. You're not allowed to do that. Assault, there's assault and a pepper. They both come in a shaker. One is white, one is kind of gray, brown. The other night I was having dinner at home, said to my wife, can you pass the salt? And she said to me, what do you say? And I said, now! I'm not sure why she got upset with that. What was I supposed to say? Assault is considered threatening or attempting or causing fear of offensive physical contact, or actually doing it. And then battery is the same thing inside your computer and in your cell phone, unless you actually touch somebody inappropriately, and then that's considered battery. So if you go around just randomly touching people like a creepy stalking guy that coming around groping, right? Then that's battery. Yeah, bro.
Shall we go with the What does it mean for contributing negligence?
Who has to comply?
If their parent does
Anybody
something,
is,
right? Like let's say they
the
provide
healthcare
care,
or health information custodian, and specifically listed in the
but like you kind of
legislation, and you see
it's not
here,
proper.
animal service,
and then
hospitals,
the patient,
regulated health
like it's not going to do anything, but the patient
nurses,
gets
doctors,
drunk,
dentists, chiropractors,
and then
etc.
he hurts himself.
So,
But because of
health information custodian is the person that can possess the records. In the ambulance service, that will be the chief of the service. Obviously, it's not that person, but they are ultimately responsible. The quality service department within the service would actually handle the documentation. We can get that. What types of information does it apply to? Anything that identifies the information about the health care of an individual. Okay? Physical and mental health, family history, payment, your health card number. So this is a big deal, right? Just having the health card number, that unique identifier is yours. So a physician could go and enter your healthcare number in with the Bergen code into the healthcare, into the system, and look at all the things that have happened to you, where you are actually right now. So if we bring a patient to the hospital and they are doing research on those kinds of patients, they can look up that patient by their healthcare number. That's more accurate than doing name and date of birth because there's so many duplicates out there. Okay? So the issue for you guys is going to be the healthcare number, the name, their address, and then other specific identifying factors such as it can involve, but doesn't always involve, can involve their medical history and meds. The other one is who's the substitute decision maker, or SDM. That's considered health information that's protected as well. And basically the substitute decision maker is somebody that's been entrusted with the estate and assume responsibility. You can have personal care and estate. So substitute decision maker for either one of those. This would be a person that's going to come in and have access to information about you to decide whether they unplug the ventilator or not. Okay. Person that has legal authority under PIPA to consent for an incapable individual. So that goes to the one of the last few slides on the previous presentation, where we have somebody that's mentally incompetent or deficient somehow. They can't advocate for themselves. They will have somebody that is either a guardian or the substitute decision maker that will give those authority to make those decisions for that person. Okay, so consent that is not expressed but can be inferred from the surrounding circumstances. Again, we talked about that, unconsciousness, etc. There we go. So name, address, date of birth, health card number, and then facts about the situation being attended to, including health history and the type of health care provided. So that kind of information is what we're gathering, and that is what's kind of protected. You can use the information to provide treatment and continue assessment and intervention. Health advice that we don't really do. Plan and deliver appropriate services. So that's a good example of at least one research initiative that was done by Niagara EMS. They used information from a research study that they tracked patients that had fallen in their home and fractured their hip, and they started monitoring that patient from the time they were injured till they died, and they watched for how the continuum of care came about, to like the increase in the number of calls, to the mobility issues, to when they went to rehab, to when they went home, and all along there, and then looked at it to strategize the types of care delivered that would be appropriate for those patients. And one of the things that they determined is those throw rugs and floor mats should be removed from old people's homes because they cause people to trip and fall and break their hips. So you know those IKEA mats that you can, the Jurgen mat and the Mateo mat, the Ruggio rug that you can buy at IKEA for $4. It's $4 that's invested towards killing an old person because they trip and fall on them. So from a community paramedicine standpoint and a patient safety standpoint, that's what they determined is fall and injury prevention. But you got to stop that continuum from happening because it's just a declining thing all the way across. So in here, they can use the information in EMS to investigate complaints and manage incidents. And as it says down here, research and statistical programs, which is like what I talked about there. So does it apply to you? Yes, you're considered an agent. The custodian is the ambulance service or the chief. You are an agent. So if you're confused about those two terms there, those are the ones that the custodian possesses the information, and that's the chief, and you guys are the agents. So you perform activities for the purposes of the custodian and not for your own purposes, right? So you work for this person here. You're an agent of the custodian. Because you work in the circle of care, you can receive the personal health information and pass that on to other people within the circle of care, but there's limitations. And skip that, skip that, skip that. You're working part of an emergency crew while outside the emergency department at the local hospital. You observe ACRs, ambulance call reports, so paper forms, paper charts, clearly visible on the dash of some other crew's ambulance. In so doing, PHIPAA is being violated. True or false? Why? Because anybody can look in from the public and look inside the ambulance, it's parked outside the hospital. So a good example, I would bet you anything that if you went over to Centenary right now, there's probably multiple ambulances sitting there right now. 2 o'clock in the afternoon, it started to peak. I know I've gone there and counted 18 ambulances sitting at Centenary and about 12 police cars. Okay, so if you have ACRs or forms sitting on your dash, there's a real good chance that people are able to walk around if they're willing to inside and look in and read what's on there. You were working part of a paramedic crew while outside the emergency department. No, that didn't change. After cleaning or stocking the back of the ambulance after a call, you go inside the emergency to sit with the colleagues in the crew room. Crew room is where documentation is completed in the hospital. As you walk towards the other crews, there's 11 paramedics in the room. You overhear several of them engaged in a conversation about a patient that was just transported to hospital. What do you get when you get 11 paramedics in the room at the same time? 13 different opinions. What are you gonna do? Anybody like to eat? I told you to take advantage of learning opportunities. So A is a possibility. Go back outside to the ambulance so you're not culpable. That's a good one, eh? That's a little cop out, right? Yeah, sissy. Yeah, don't like confrontation? Yeah, good. Remind them that they cannot share patient information. Call the supervisor. Snitch. So I like C and I like A. So now if I was presented with a test question, I would always seek out to pick the most correct answer. Right? There might be 2. Sometimes the 2 are real good because I know how to make it, weave it in there, and draw you in, and catch you on the rod, and then I'm gonna net you right into the boat. Okay? They do this on the AM code. They'll have at least 2 choices that you really have to discern which one is the best one, and I would say this one is the better one. Because if you close the door, the public can't overhear you. That's true, but they're still in violation of PHIPAA because they're talking amongst each other. So you have to pick that one.
It's not the room where they're supposed to talk about it?
Nope. Not for sharing details. Not for sharing details. You cannot share specific details. I can tell you, I did a call in this general area for such and so age, male, female, whatever, and give you some patient details, but I cannot get into specifics. You cannot do that. The learning opportunity does not include saying personal information about the patient. That's what happens when Turning Point is activated. It'll give us a big little chart there to say what you guys said. So if you had your clickers and I had it turned on, you could answer on here without saying anything, and then we can see what everybody answered. And then if it's like, oh boy, they don't get it, I guess I'll click back. But you don't have to get it, so. You attend a call at a local pizza shop for an assault. Several people tried to rob the place and 5 people were assaulted, 2 were stabbed. Police and several ambulances are on scene. Go outside to retrieve some equipment from your ambulance. There is a large media presence outside, and as you walk to and from the ambulance, a very pushy TV reporter tries to get information from you. They ask you to comment off record. They said this morning, is this real? Well, I guess it is real because I did that call. That was me. That was outside getting the stuff from the ambulance. The crews were inside, and I went outside to the ambulance to get something for them. And then the TV reporter came over to me and asked if I could tell them what was going on inside off the record. So can you? likes affidavit. Just ignore the reporter and walk away very briskly. So the faster you walk, that would be it. Only answer questions off camera. Does anybody like that one? Tell the reporter to call your supervisor who's not currently at scene. No. Answer any questions the reporter may have that do not include patient details. Answer any questions as the reporter will otherwise make up the details, which is true. Journalists are all fucking liars. I mean, if they were reporting the truth, they would be reporting history and not the news. Yeah, so they're liars. So your department, remember I said there's SOPs to protect you? This is an example of an SOP that's there, it's present to protect you. You're not to speak to reporters without authorization. So you couldn't talk to the reporter even if you wanted to. So what actually happened was the guy comes up to me and, oh, it's very nice. Oh, so how's it going in there? Got a lot of patients, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, I didn't see. Well, you know, you can just tell me. It's off the record. And he's carrying the media film camera. What's the news camera? Like it's fairly big. He's holding it down here. And I can see the red light is turned on. And I'm like, not on your life. And I crossed the police tape line and went inside. So he was actually playing a trick to get me to talk and say it's not on camera, it's off the record, but he was going to record my voice. So in this one, I would say you'll have to contact the supervisor. We're not authorized to speak, that's what I would say. Otherwise, this one's a good one too. Yeah?
So your supervisor would be the one that would be able to give consent to answer any questions?
Yeah. If they were gonna allow you, they may not even allow you. It's gonna depend on what's happening there. And in that case, because it's a crime scene, probably not. You and your partner have been held in the local emergency department on awful delay for 5 hours. Dispatch is sending you a new crew to relieve you. You need to give a report to the crew. There's a requirement at the hip of that. You withhold certain components of the patient history. I love questions like this. And it's only a true false. So it's a 50-50. Yeah?
Just the question on the other case, so would the correct, or would the most correct answer be like contact the supervisor or just walk away?
Oh, it's not the supervisor.
Why not just
Ethics. Remember what I told you about ethics? Is there a requirement that you withhold, or can there be a requirement that you withhold certain information under PHIPA? No.
There can be, if the patient specifically says.
Did you hear what she said? There can be a specific requirement if the patient specifically says you cannot say that. Cannot tell them that. So it's a bit of a mindfuck question. That's why I like it. Because you could be in a situation, and here's a good example. You have a patient that in February walking outside. It's one of those days in Toronto where it rained last night, and now it's -20, because that's Toronto weather for you. It just feels like being warm and then freezing over. And there's ice on the sidewalk. And this poor guy is trying to make it to his office to go to work. He's well dressed, so it's not, you know, a homeless person or somebody that's at risk or marginalized. And they slip on the sidewalk, and they fall and they break their wrist. And in the ambulance, because it's February and now it's -20. You've splinted and moved the patient to the ambulance for further assessment. The patient says, listen, I have a recent history of being diagnosed with schizophrenia, but I don't want anybody to know. You can't tell anybody. Even in your past medical history, you can't say anything, and you don't report it. Because, in this case, the past medical history and what the patient is asking you has nothing to do with the fractured arm. They slipped on the ice and broke the wrist. Schizophrenia is irrelevant. Now, we could take the same situation, because everything is dependent on the context of the situation. That's where you will hear us say, that depends, or adult diapers. There could be a situation where the patient tells me, I don't want you to tell anybody about that, but that will compromise patient care. So the thing that they're telling you or they're refusing for you to say must not relate directly to the patient care. So I could then say, if the patient said they had chest pains, that might change things. Me not telling the hospital that they've been recently diagnosed with schizophrenia because they might be on a medication that produces a rapid heart rate. But that's all in with your knowledge. Again, it's not a binary situation where that they say yes, then fine. If they say no, oh well. You have to engage in a conversation. I understand your concerns surrounding this. However, this is my take on this. This is what I feel about that. Otherwise, if they fell on the ice and it has nothing to do with it, sounds good to me. I'll eliminate that for you. Done. Okay. The patient in this case was transported to the hospital, so now I've changed it from just the talking here where we're talking about somebody who slipped on the ice to give you specific example to the hospital because of chest pain. Can you now advise the new crew of the patient's mental health history? Well, I think I kind of gave you the answer already. If it relates, you might have to. Again, it will depend on the situation. This report should be done where? Near to where the patient is currently located, where other patients and relatives are. Just hand the new crew the HCR and let them read it. I think I like that one. In the crew room, as long as no other crews are present, at the nursing station near where some nurses are, the new crew must do their own assessments under PETA. Yep.
So if, like, about the last example, you said it has to relate for you to give the information.
Yeah.
But then when she answered, she said, only if they, like, consent to that information being given.
Yeah.
So what if, like, I just feel like, I'm so sorry.
I can see that. So the patient can withdraw consent for you to release medical history as long as it doesn't relate directly to the care being provided at any time. They have that right.
So if like the care is being provided which matches with the patient's like history, but they still request not for it to be given, then what do you do in that case? Like
So
if they
you
did
need to
not.
have a conversation with that patient.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So in the case that they have schizophrenia, they tell you not to tell anyone, even though you should be like documenting everything, would you keep that out of?
Yeah. Because then I'm telling, so it's good, putting it on my ACR is as good as going up to somebody and telling them, the guy with the broken arm, he's a schizophrenic, you better watch him. Right? If you told me not to say anything, I can't put it on the ACR either. You might wanna write, on your, because when we cover documentation, there's a patient information section, there's an assessment section, there's a procedure section, and then there's remarks. I would write in remarks, patient history of medications left out, not left blank, because then you can't leave anything blank, because that means somebody else can come in there and fill in whatever they want. Right, so I would write something over there, at patient request, under PO, just leave it at that. They can fucking ask them themselves in the hospital. Yeah.
What if the information that the patient is choosing to not consent is harm to others?
That's different altogether. That's completely different. PHIPAA is patient health information. Harm to others is a different thing altogether. That's mental health.
For example, what if they have like a disease and
Is it a reportable disease? They don't have a choice. Okay, we're good on that? So in this one, I would say go into the crew room as long as nobody else is present. Right, it's a private place, you can tell the crew what's necessary, you can give them the ACR, and then they'll know enough about that patient, but they're in the circle of care, so they can have the ACR. You've had a very busy shift, you are the paramedic, what do you expect? About to be busy. You get so many calls you cannot complete your ACRs for the day, so you decide to finish them at home that night. When you arrive home, you are too tired, drunk, to even take your equipment bag containing the ACRs inside the house. As luck would have it, your car gets broken into, your iPad, car stereo, Rolex watch, Wayne Gretzky rookie card, and your paramedic equipment bag are all fucking stolen. You know what the thing that bothers me the most about this thing here? Wayne Gretzky rookie card. It recently sold at auction. The single card, $3.7 million. Explain that to the insurance company. I would be pissed about that. Screw the ACRs. Okay. What areas of PHIPAA are of concern here, if any? Nobody but a physician can possess patient records. I don't know if you've ever been in a merge long enough. I mean, they do a lot of things digitally now, but you would see the doctors all walking around. Every patient they saw, they would take a section of the patient chart off and put it in their coat. And then when they finished their shift, they would lock them in their briefcase or whatever they were using and take it home, because that's how they would bill the healthcare. No one else can possess charts. So the biggest problem is that you took ACRs home. You were not allowed to do that. And so that actually goes back to one of the second or third slides in when we talk about what doctors can even have and talk about that. They are actually the health information custodians for their own patients. You attend a call at a local seniors home for a patient with a fever. All alone, it was a fever. Anyway, oh, you don't like to read? Come on. I'm not going to communicate in that. Don't worry about it. What did I do with the money that my parents gave me for singing lessons? I bought a bicycle. Your partner requests the patient's chart for information. Charge nurse in the long-term care facility refuses to provide it to you, stating that it contains personal patient information, you know. Come on, here we go. Trust me, this happens. It used to get me all pissed off, and now I'm just like, okay, come on, let's go. Let's go, come on. Game one. Let's have some fun. Because I know you're fucking wrong. There's no sense in me getting mad when you're wrong and I'm right. So let's have some fun. And I'll wander you up a little bit. And then, oops, the envelope opened. Oh, look, there it is. It's coming out. Can she withhold the drug? Yes. If you're just an ambulance driver, maybe you sit in the back. No, you need to see the chart to accurately fill out the HCR. No, you are providing patient care directly to the patient. You're in the circle of care. You need to be provided with a chart suitable for transport. The paramedic does not need to see the whole chart. The RN is a control freak. I will report him or her to the College of Nurses. You're in the circle of care. You can't withhold the chart. Okay? This line is also good here. I agree with that. So if you're reading my test questions, I will put bullshit with the truth. Right? So that's true. In a long-term care facility, they may have a binder with the patient's chart in it that says, patient had a bowel movement today, and it was of normal consistency, and then the patient was given a shower, and it just goes fucking on and on. Right? I don't need that. They will have a transport letter or chart or something that they can send away to the patient so that we don't have the entire thing. That stays in the facility. If there's a DNR, they'll attach it on there. You get it. All right? That's all I need. So in this instance here, that's true. The paramedic does not need the whole chart, but we need to see something. Okay? So watch for those. I will try to draw you in. And don't draw you into the circle of care. So I would say it's C. No, you are providing patient care directly to the patient. You're in the circle of care. The other thing I know is there's a thing out there, if you don't know the answer, pick C. Has anybody heard that? I hear that from them over across the street at UT. They tell people that. Some universities tell them that. Well, if Dave knows that, what the fuck do you think he's going to do? Come on, go ahead, pick C. In fact, I might make C sound like a good answer. You go for it. Okay? The other one that they say, I like this one. Pick the longest stem. That one's the longest stem. That part's right. I'm picking that answer. Be careful. You know it, you know it. If you have to use those tricks, you're guessing. To attend a call for a patient is extremely SOB. SOB all means short of breath, son of a bitch, and school of business if you're in Centennial College. I kept pointing that out to them over there and said, hey, you work at that son of a bitch place. I'm like, that's school of business, Dave. Don't say that anymore. I'm like, what? I'm not supposed to say son of a bitch? You guys call your fucking place SOB? That means son of a bitch. So they changed the name to the business school. And they said, ha, Dave, we got you. We changed it to the business school. And I meant, the acronym is the bullshit. Well done. And they're like, would you stop? I'm like, I can't stop myself. They're extremely short of breath. You and your partner perform a rapid extrication of the patient to your ambulance because they're sick. Safe in the back of the truck, your partner starts an IV. Whew. As you hold the sharps container, your partner accidentally stabs you with the dirty, filthy, blood-contaminated needle right in your hand. And I've seen this happen. Get the sharps container, hold it up like that, and then, blah! That's my fucking hand. I've seen that happen. At the hospital, you feel dizzy, nauseated, begin burping, you know what that means, feel itchy, and, son of a bitch, due to the anxiety from the incident. Are you going to catch something? Could you get HIV, Hep B, or Ebola? You You decide to check in and see a doctor. You will need to know if the patient has any diseases so you can make an informed decision about antiretroviral treatment. The reason you need to do informed consent about that, and you really need to know what you're doing, this is not to be taken lightly. Antiretroviral treatment can put you in liver failure. That's all you need to know. You want to keep your liver, only use it for hernia. Not good. The patient would need to provide a sample of their blood to confirm any risks to you. Yeah, because we need to know if they have anything, right? The HIPAA will apply in this case. Which of the following is the most correct answer? Patient must provide a sample of their blood for testing. I got stuck with a needle. The patient can say no, and there's nothing you can do. You might need to go to court to force the patient to provide a sample. The ER doc can take the patient's blood and send it for testing and just say it was part of their care. You will die very slowly and will have tremendous pain. And there is nothing you or anyone else can do about it. That's really dark. Slowly. It's one of the most popular, the top questions that people would ask if somebody's died pre-hospital or with an house. Did they die quickly? I can't lie. I want to lie, but I won't. Who likes A? Anybody over there like A? Who else? You like A? Good, good. You like A? Okay, D. Because this one's related. Does anybody like D? What's wrong with D? It's unethical, right? That's what the doctor's lying. I mean, it's nice if the doctor's willing to go out on a limb like that for you, but they're lying and it's unethical. So that no, that one doesn't work either. C. Anybody like C? So you always pick C when you don't know the answer, right? E. Anybody like E? Nobody's going for E. There was a doctor that used to work at Scarborough Hospital in the Emerge, and when people would say, you know, am I going to die? They said, you're going to die eventually. I'm like, good advice. Not lying. B is the answer. Now you would say, what about the mandatory reporting? Well, that's assuming that they don't already know that if that patient has anything or not. We're talking about a random patient that they don't know. The patient, if they knew, they would tell you at some point. Public health will get in touch with you because you've got a needle stick. Okay? But in this case, that patient could be some 84-year-old person that worked for an insurance company all their life and never did any drugs, never had any risky behaviors, didn't do anything, doesn't, you know, but they can also say, no, you're not testing me for HIV or AIDS or Hep C, Hep B, like, none of that. They just don't want to have anything to do with it. Now, I will tell you, this has happened, and it's very rare. Ordinarily, the people are like, oh, that's terrible, that happened? Well, absolutely, right? Because they're like, come on, right? You have to be a real prick to say, oh, you got stuck with a needle? Like, come on. Now, known infected needle with actual AIDS. A patient that has AIDS. Deep needle stick injury to the hand. What are the odds of getting AIDS from that? 50%, 75%, you say 5%, 100%. How much? The needle's full of blood. There's even blood on the outside of the needle, and it went way in your hand. It's in, and they're like having to yank it out, and it was deep. What are the odds? Higher than 5%? Anybody want to say 20%? 15? Do you know what it actually is? It's 0.00000001%. Because AIDS is contracted from repeated exposure to infected blood. So that one time, it's almost zero. Not comfortable to go home knowing you got stuck with that. But it's more likely that you'll catch Hep C from something, because you already should be immune to Hep B. If you're not, you're in trouble because you probably won't be able to stay in the program. Because there was somebody a few years ago that had to withdraw. They hadn't had their second dose, and they came here and they had their teeter, and it's like, nope. So they had to start the regimen, and the 2 shots are 6 months apart, which meant now, October it was discovered, November, December, January, February, March, April, you're gone. Hep B. Question about this?
Case 8, next week. This case 8. The answer in case 8, when you mentioned the one that's almost right, or when you said you don't do the full check, what was that one?
Which one?
D. So you're saying D is not the right answer?
Because that's, this is more correct. That's why.
Right, but like,
See the question?
yeah.
Oh, it didn't say most correct, but it's most correct. Most.
Yeah.
So when you find multiple answers that look like they're correct, you have to weigh them in your mind and make a judgment on which one is the most correct answer.
Right.
The circle of care wording in there comes out of PHIPAA. It says they can't withhold the chart, which they can't. And they're in the circle, you're in the circle of care. If you're in the circle of care, you have to see the documentation. I think this is the end. Wait for it. Oh! Don't you love that? $29.95. 3 easy payments. 1 week! For a limited time. Get 2 for the price of 1. What about communicable diseases? You said that they have the right to refuse. I did, except for these things. So there's a mandatory reporting system. Remember, I said child in need of protection is 1, communicable disease is the other, gunshot, animal bites, assault, murder, shooting, penetrating injuries, sexual assault, all that. So is there any difference between our case study and the patient has communicable disease? And then yes, there is, in fact, because they can only withhold the information from you if they did not know. So if they did not know that they had AIDS or TB or Hep C or Hep B, they obviously couldn't tell you. But as soon as they find out, they have to tell you, I have that. And it's because of the etiology of these diseases, how they're contracted and how they're transmitted. COVID is another example, that these are now of the 81 mandatory reporting communicable diseases. So they're, as a gift, there's an exception to everything. So how it usually works is when you take a patient into the hospital, if they haven't already told you that they're Hep positive or whatever, the hospital will probably determine that, and because it's a mandatory reporting communicable disease, they will then notify public health. And they can do so without the patient's consent, and the patient cannot refuse. They will tell public health that this patient has TB, and that the patient came in, these are the people that had contact with the patient, and then public health will either contact you directly or the department or both, and make recommendations to you. Have a lovely week. Have a good lab. Enjoy your anatomy class tomorrow. We'll see you next week.
Well, I have to repeat
Oh, and I guess you can enjoy PhD as
I
well.
was talking about it and I didn't.
But the thing was, like, he didn't even have his, the notes weren't on there, right?
It's on the slides, but it's like completely off.
Huh?
It's on the slides.
Really? Where?
Like it's like all the cases, but like there's a bunch of like extra information or stuff that he wasn't on his side.
Yeah, it was on his side, but not ours, right?
Yeah, it's not on ours.